Last year, Vivo released their first foldable in the global market, but only the Pro model made its way to us. This year, there is no Pro model at all, and while the X Fold 5 does offer some improvements, we're going to have to dig a little deeper to find out why it even exists. It's thinner and lighter, has a better IP certification and a larger battery, but its cameras are a bit of a sidestep to the Fold 3 Pro. There's a few other cutbacks, but everything else is pretty much the same, even the chipset. It recently landed in India for 150,000 Indian rupees and only comes in one variant with 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage. That's 37,000 rupees cheaper than the same spec Samsung Z Fold 7, but only 10,000 cheaper than the X Fold 3 Pro. So today we're going to see if it's worth saving 10,000 rupees and picking this up instead of its predecessor. It comes in titanium grey and white. I have the grey color and I like how it's a bit of a deeper grey but not as dark as black. I also really like the smaller ring around the camera island and that the backplate goes from edge to edge with less text for a cleaner look. The back is made from glass fiber, the cover screen is protected by 2nd gen armor glass, and we now get an IP58 and IP59 plus dust and water certification. So it can still go 1.5 meters deep for 30 minutes, but it can now withstand high pressure water jets and it's now also dust proof. So those are all great improvements, and while it's not completely dust tight, it is still protected against dust particles, more so than even the Z Fold 7. The hinge is still made from carbon fiber and the frames are still made from aluminum, but the phone is now even thinner at 9.2mm when folded and 4.3mm unfolded. It's also a lot lighter at just 217 grams. It's not exactly the lightest and thinnest foldable around, but it comes very, very close. It likely has the largest battery found in a foldable of this size though, coming in at a whopping 6,000 mAh. For comparison, the Z Fold 7 has a 4,400 mAh battery, and that's barely any thinner. This also has 80 watt wired and 40 watt wireless charging, which is actually a little bit lower than last year's Pro model, but it's quite a bit higher than that of the Z Fold 7, which has 25 watt wired and 15 watt wireless, so I can't really complain. We're getting to the point now where thickness doesn't even matter when it comes to foldables. No one's really going to notice a phone that's 0.1mm thinner. I mean, in hand, this doesn't even feel like a foldable when it's closed up. What does matter is how many times a foldable can open and close before it becomes unreliable, and the X Fold 5 can do it 600,000 times. For context, last year's was rated at 500,000 folds, and so is the Z Fold 7. It can also hold itself up at any angle between 45 and 150 degrees, which is better than last year's and even other foldables around. And when opened up, the crease seems to have improved and is barely noticeable. One cut I did notice is that the X Fold 5 now uses a side-mounted fingerprint sensor, instead of the dual ultrasonic in-display fingerprint sensors we saw in the X Fold 3 Pro last year. Most other foldables have side-mounted sensors though, so I can't complain too much, and it is ridiculously fast. This brings us back to the whole thinner phone dilemma. It seems like Vivo switched back to a side-mounted fingerprint sensor so that they could make their foldable just a little bit thinner. I would rather have ultrasonic fingerprint sensors and a slightly thicker foldable. But hey, that's just me. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. This whole thing about wanting to be the thinnest foldable around is honestly starting to get a bit pathetic. Another change is that Vivo have ditched the alert slider in favor of a new shortcut button. You can still have it work to change the sound profile, but you can also set it to perform other shortcuts or tasks. We now get FunTouch OS 15 over Android 15 for the global model, and it looks mostly the same as before with loads of customization options. When closed up, it feels the same as pretty much any other Vivo flagship bar-styled phone. When unfolded though, we get a few useful foldable features. Just like before, 3 recent apps are shown in the app dock, and when in an app, there's a taskbar which allows you to quickly view all your apps and can be hidden if needed, just like we saw with its predecessor. We still have Smart Screen Shift, which automatically switches to your cover screen when in tent mode. There's still Flex Mode, which turns the bottom half of the screen into a control panel. And there's still split screen mode with all the same functions as before. But now there's something called Origin Workbench, which allows you to quick switch between apps, and it's proved a lot more useful to me than I would have thought. You'll also be getting 4 years of major Android updates, and since this is a global model, of course all of Google's goodies are pre-installed. So we get a new shortcut button and a new workbench mode. Oh, and by the way, we also now get eSIM support, which is fantastic. But other than that, everything else is pretty much identical. And when it comes to displays, They are exactly the same as before. There's a 6.53-inch AMOLED cover screen and an 8.03-inch AMOLED main screen. They can both still display over 1 billion colors, use LTPO tech to refresh between 1 and 120 Hz, and can reach 4500 nits of peak brightness. So there aren't really any noteworthy display improvements this time around, but that's not necessarily a bad thing since its displays are some of the best around anyway. And then there's performance, which once again is pretty much exactly the same as before. We get the same Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chip, which is last year's flagship Qualcomm CPU. You won't get the same benchmark scores as an 8 Elite powered phone, but you'll get identical frame rates when gaming since we've kind of reached the peak of what phones can actually do. The only real benefits you'd get from the newer chip is when emulating PC games. We do see an improvement in RAM and ROM though, thanks to newer LPDDR5X Ultra RAM and UFS 4.1 storage. But then we get to cameras, and it kind of feels like they've gone a bit backwards this time round. But then again, you need to remember that this phone does not have the Pro label. It does, however, kind of have a Pro camera setup, consisting of triple 50 megapixel rear sensors for the ultra-wide main and periscope, as well as a pair of 20 megapixel selfie cameras. And we get the same great color styles as before, thanks to the Zeiss partnership, which can be used across all the sensors. The ultra-wide is the exact same JN1 sensor we see in the X Fold 3 Pro, but the main now uses an IMX921 sensor, which has a wider aperture, but it's a smaller sensor. It's nice to see that things are very consistent between all three cameras though. The periscope has the same 70mm focal length for a 3x optical zoom, but it now relies on the IMX882 sensor. It has a slightly wider aperture and it's a slightly larger sensor too. 6x lossless zoom looks fantastic, and I was very impressed with the telephoto enhancement feature, which kicks in from 10x. All three cameras offer autofocus, and the main and periscope still benefit from OIS. The periscope still caps out at 100x zoom, but results come out a bit more polished thanks to post-processing. The periscope also still offers 15cm minimum focusing distance, so there's still a super macro mode. But this time images come out a bit more detailed, and the max macro zoom is now 20x instead of last year's 6x. But just like with last year, the periscope reverts to 3.7x zoom when using portrait mode, and my face still comes out a bit too smooth for my liking, even with beautify mode disabled. The selfie cameras are the same whether you use the cover screen or main screen, and they're now 20 megapixel sensors, down from 32 megapixels. They stick to the same aperture, but they now have a wider field of view. You can also still use the rear cameras to take selfies the same way we could before, but just because we can do that doesn't mean that the selfie camera should be this incapable. Just like with the Fold 3, the Fold 5 also struggles with ultra-wide shots at night. But the main and periscope actually seem to have improved in low light situations. And that's likely because Vivo improve on optimizations every year. It's not always about the hardware, but software also plays a major role in end results, which is why 100x max zoom this time is a lot more usable at night than before. All three rear sensors can shoot 4K 60fps video, and while the X Fold 5 uses the same ultra-wide camera, it's actually more stable and seems to pack in more detail. The main camera is also more stable this time, and while detail is quite good, the main improvement here is dynamic range. And while the periscope offers identical video results compared to last year, it seems like Vivo have improved on OIS and white balance. We still get 8K video, but it's once again limited to just the main camera. And while there is portrait video, this time it's capped at 1080p resolution, which is a bit of a letdown considering the X Fold 3 Pro could shoot 4K cinematic portrait video. But not much has changed when it comes to selfie portrait video, which is still capped at 1080p. Just like with last year's X Fold 3 Pro, selfie video is also capped at 1080p resolution on the brand new Vivo X Fold 5. But the good news is that we can use those back cams to shoot selfie video too. Let me know your thoughts of the video quality and microphone performance when using the actual selfie camera, and do keep in mind it is a pretty windy day here in Cape Town. And like I mentioned earlier, there is a feature to use the back cameras to take selfies, even for video, which is great. But unlike last year, the modes are limited to photos, portrait photos, and regular videos. So no portrait video when using the rear sensors, and no other modes either. But it is super useful to be able to use the back main camera for selfie video, especially at night. I'd probably use the rear cameras less for selfies if the selfie camera was actually decent though. Recording regular ultra-wide video at night is just as underexposed as last year. Main video is just as grainy as last year, but exposure seems to have stepped up, and periscope video seems to be better in terms of contrast and light noise handling. So while on paper this camera system seems worse, in reality it's identical, aside from the lack of 4K cinematic video. You also have to remember this phone doesn't have the Pro label, but yet it seems to keep up with last year's Pro model. So I wouldn't exactly base my decision on cameras when choosing between the X Fold 5 and last year's X Fold 3 Pro. Still, if you decide to pick up the X Fold 5 instead, you'll be losing out on faster charging and ultrasonic fingerprint sensors. But for 10,000 rupees less, you'll be getting a thinner, lighter, stronger build with a better IP certification, a stronger, more reliable hinge, a shortcut button, a larger battery, eSIM supports, and faster RAM and storage. I guess the X Fold 5 is not for those who already own an X Fold 3 Pro. It doesn't exist for that reason. It exists for those who don't yet own a Vivo Foldable and are looking to buy their first one. And at this price point, it doesn't really get much better than this. That is, if you can find one in your region. As always, this is TechNick, and I'll catch you in the next one.